was meant to be a turning point when Meghan Markle signed her huge Netflix contract. She would lead original programming and rebrand herself outside of the royal walls in a relationship that would upend the entertainment industry. However, what began as a royal foray into Hollywood is now degenerating into a major catastrophe that Netflix was not prepared for. Top executives are frantic behind the scenes. Internal investigations are going over the tape, and one particular event from a cookery show could be the final straw. Let's go back a moment. Love and Meghan's series Meghan was promoted as a touching lifestyle-focused documentary reality show. Imagine moments of well-being and empowerment. However, when producers saw striking parallels between Meghan's video and, well, other shows, the tone changed. A strangely familiar scene from her upcoming second season appeared in The Big Red Flag. Too much like home, it turns out that Gordon Ramsay's Hell's Kitchen wasn't the only source of inspiration. It was essentially an exact replica. We're discussing whole scenes that have been lifted. Cooking competitions, exciting encounters between chefs unbelievably. A winner was named head chef, and some of Ramsay's famous quotes executives were blown away, word for word. It was so plainly shredded, not because it was bold. The episode was taken from Hell's Kitchen Season 1, which is when Ramsay's explosive television character first appeared. It wasn't even a deep cut from a forgotten season. Meghan reportedly believed that no one would notice her walking so far back, but someone did. Netflix's top dogs, co-CEOs Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters, made an urgent call when a screener identified the program during a regular check. Although these two have had their share of internal arguments, they quickly came together after this plagiarism bomb was thrown. According to reports, both were shocked, even embarrassed, that something so obvious had advanced this far in the manufacturing process. At that point, Netflix abruptly ended the project. The portion was immediately removed from all cuts, and new footage was mandated. However, there was a catch this time. Meghan would not receive a fresh script. The next video would be completely improvised in an effort to make things right at the last minute without allowing her to borrow again. Furthermore, it's like giving someone a parachute after they've already jumped when a reality program is remade without a script. Meghan took the cut seriously, as was to be expected. She allegedly lost it on internal calls, arguing that one of her best contributions to the show was the culinary scene. She even claimed that it was unique since she had put her own twist on it by hosting the tournament in a rented home and giving the winner the task of cooking at a made-up charity function. But it wasn't saved by that alone. The kicker is this. Gordon Ramsay's team was discreetly contacted by Netflix in an attempt to defuse the situation and clarify that they were managing it internally. These days, it was more about optics than copyright. Naturally, Ramsay didn't remain silent. According to sources, he was incensed. It felt like a parody wearing pricey makeup because not only had lines been plagiarized, but the very intensity, timing, and confrontations of his show had been so accurately imitated. From then, things got worse. Ramsay's group began exploring. Meghan's team had no defense as Netflix intensified their internal investigation, and additional instances of content theft emerged. The more Netflix investigated, the more it appeared that Meghan's creative choices weren't simply dubious, but possibly irresponsible. Furthermore, the pandemonium was not abating because reshoots were in progress, and there was no apparent direction. Nothing could have happened at a worse time. Netflix was already having problems with its users. When the Meghan Markle scandal hit their desks, it wasn't just a PR disaster. It was a direct threat to an already brittle brand image. Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters weren't just trying to patch the show. They were also trying to prevent the platform from losing more viewers due to price hikes that banned fan-favorite shows and increased competition from platforms like HBO Max and Peacock. Meetings inside became contentious. Every episode of With Love Meghan was examined by legal teams for possible copyright violations, and the results were enough to make any executive perspire. Hell's Kitchen wasn't the only place. Other shows' tidbits had been interwoven. Style cues from the Kardashians, recognizable Rachel Ray show portions, and even brief clips that mirrored previous Food Network contests. Meghan seems to have constructed a Frankenstein display. One item was taken from here, while another was fashioned elsewhere, all wrapped in her brand, and displayed as authentic. The real turning point occurred when test audiences were given a preview of the upcoming season. According to sources, she dismissed it as inspiration, saying that all creators take inspiration from other works. However, Netflix wasn't buying that, especially when the dialogue was verbatim copied. Immediately, viewers noted the parallels. Jokes aside, others even claimed that Meghan had binge-watched Food Network and set a record. The fact that viewer trust was declining was what Netflix cared about most. In addition to disliking the show, viewers thought it was misleading. Meghan, meanwhile, remained unyielding and would not acknowledge that her actions had gone too far. She allegedly dismissed the accusations as internal drama that would end when producers attempted to explain how serious they were getting. But it wasn't. If anything, it was increasing speed, so Netflix had to decide. Keep supporting her, take a chance on additional criticism, or pull away before the harm gets worse. The call that Meghan had been dreading then arrived. Ted Sarandos made it apparent that the copied passages were being permanently removed by using no more euphemistic language. No compromise would be made, the program would not be mellowed, and there would be no possibility of anything resembling Ramsay's show airing. It has been alleged that Meghan attempted to compromise by offering to re-edit the episode with new dialogue, but was too late. There was no longer any trust. The fact that Meghan still had creative control over important parts of the show made matters even more complicated. This meant that, at least on paper, she could veto certain edits, decide on content, and affect how the series developed. However, following the plagiarism scandal, her influence shifted from actual to symbolic. In order to take control of the reshoots, executives discreetly started removing her authority, redistributing responsibilities, and hiring backup producers. The updated strategy: limit Meghan's authority behind the camera, and let her to improvise if necessary, but maintain strict restrictions and close supervision. There were now legal monitors at every shoot. Before it even approached a public release, every screen time was examined twice, and every script modification was subjected to copyright filters. It was the most severe damage control ever. Legal tape and corporate fear were now holding together a performance centered around Meghan Markle. What started out as a high-profile project had devolved into a warning, and the coming weeks would see if Netflix could recover anything. Not just executives kept an eye on the situation. Questions from shareholders had begun to surface. Since Meghan's show had turned into a creative and legal problem, investors demanded answers, and her Netflix deal wasn't cheap. Remorse started to reverberate through internal memos. The once celebrated collaboration was being subtly reevaluated. After contract's renewal conditions were re-examined, someone with knowledge of the situation disclosed that there was little chance of a second renewal. Meghan, meanwhile, was delving deeper. She had always presented herself as a disruptor who rewrote the rules and questioned the established order, but now that the system was retaliating, she was finding it difficult to maintain control. According to reports, she was attempting to micromanage editing, demanding daily video inspections, and calling frequent emergency meetings that few people ever attended. It was evident that the balance of power had changed, and Meghan was no longer in command. She was only responding. Additionally, the reshoots are a complete circus. Cast members were instructed to follow Meghan's lead without a written screenplay, which resulted in hours of loose, meandering film with no organization and no meaningful conclusion. The series editors compared it to constructing a mansion out of fog. Because there was no clear storyline, some sequences had to be completely removed. Only post-production magic was able to save others by piecing together haphazard scenes and attempting to pass them off as deliberate narrative. On-set morale had plummeted, and crew members were leaving. There was no background talent present. Once regarded as the star on a mission, Meghan was now rumored to be the cause of the mayhem. According to some employees, she pretended everything was fine. Others claimed that she was becoming more and more paranoid and believed that others were plotting against her. In any case, the crew was no longer motivated by her presence. They were worn out by it. Netflix was already formulating a covert departure strategy behind closed doors. After a limited distribution, the second season could be buried, according to one suggestion. Another, more radical suggestion is to remove the entire event off the platform, label it a restricted engagement, and proceed. The sole reason for this is the negative reaction from the public. Outright canceling a Meghan Markle exhibition might lead to legal repercussions, protest movements, or even media storms. The CEO decided on a slower bleed as a result. A silent fade into the background, no fresh promotional materials, and no marketing push. The harm persisted, though. The plagiarism controversy made headlines on blogs about entertainment. Millions of views were being accumulated by TikTok experts who were analyzing side-by-side similarities between Meghan's film and original shows. Fans repeatedly demanded that Gordon Ramsay make a public response after his name became viral. Although he never made a formal remark, those close to his camp made it obvious that he was incensed. Gordon Ramsay is the last person you want angry at you in the kitchen or in the media. Meghan's inner circle had significantly reduced by this point. Many people removed themselves, but a few devoted PR representatives and advisors remained. Opportunities for future shows, sponsor partnerships, and guest appearances that had appeared inevitable began to subtly fade. Calls went unanswered. The dates of meetings were changed. It was loudly silent. Ultimately, Meghan's love served as a lesson about what happens when influence is allowed to run amok, rather than about celebrity, the media, or even artistic freedom. When your supporters feel you're no longer worth the hassle and your creativity is dismissed as an afterthought, Netflix will move on. The sector will forget, however. Meghan would have to deal with the stain from this series for a lot longer than she had anticipated.